It all began when I started to notice quick changes in my mother. No, it began way earlier than that when I really think about it. Years. Maybe even before I could remember the difference between right and wrong, which is a pretty long time. I'd always been one of the two brothers in my family. My mother was single. She always had been ever since I could remember. Our father had bailed out on us when the news about me had arrived. We loved our mother. We really did. She bought us nice clothes even though we couldn't afford it, providing necessary food and making a good home for us. Everything was great. My mom had some issues with drinking. It wasn't just a problem. It was a big problem. She stayed single though she tried to meet others. It would always go well in the beginning until she would change her mind and show the next man out the door. Always the same story with her. I felt very alone. My brother wasn't very interested playing with me, seeing he was all about 5 years older, and he thought of me as an annoying little sibling. But all I wanted was company. I didn't find any success in making friends at school or during my spare time. I just spent every moment alone. My mom didn't care, of course. She was too busy trying to finish up her work, or she could spend the last hours at home drinking her evenings away. But I guess every single second of loneliness brought something out of me. I started to daydream a lot. Making imaginary friends was one of my favorite hobbies. Yes, a hobby. I made new ones so often it was hard to keep up, even for me. You see, there was a particular imaginary friend. He wasn't like the others. There was only one who gave me more peace than everything. He'd play with me, of course, but he'd only come around nighttime. Though he'd talk then we'd talk and fool around, making super sure my mom didn't hear us cheerfully giggling. He was an expert of many things, but he was the best at crafting and making me puppets. Every day he'd turn up with a new doll, and any design I wanted. That was his thing. The puppet man. I always managed to escape the fact that I had an imaginary friend, but with him, it was hard to deny that he was actually there, because I knew he was. Every night when he said I had to go to sleep, he stood there for another hour just to watch me and make sure I was actually falling asleep. His golden glowing eyes observing me from afar in the darkness. I stared back at him. His gray face was keeping me calm as he kept smiling towards me. I fell asleep every night, but I couldn't talk to anyone about the creature visiting me every night. It was odd. Time went on as it should have. I grew up, so did my brother. Only thing that seemed to stay the same was my mom's drinking habits. My brother moved out around the age of 18. He couldn't put up with her anymore. I was only 12 at the time, and I wouldn't get out of my home for a long time. I was waiting patiently, though. I suppose that was the only thing I could do when being alone. My imaginary friend never left, however, and it started to become a problem. He continued to visit me every single evening, keeping me company. I started to ignore him. I was mad. Had to be. At 12 years old, the whole imaginary friend deal seemed ridiculous. I had other things to do anyway. Homework, playing on my PlayStation 2. I was content. Not happy. Just neutral. I didn't feel lonely. I felt that, though a long time ago. Yet there he was, staring at me, his face hidden beneath the shadows of my room, glowing eyes studying me. Another year passed. No success. I eventually got tired of everything. School was being a downer, and my mom got worse with her drinking, even to the point where she started to self-harm. She refused to talk to me, even when I tried. She lost her job, eventually. It was something I had wanted to see happen for a long time. I always seemed like something that might help her realize that she had a problem. But no. After that, my mom wouldn't do anything but sit there, drinking all her problems away. She became angrier with time, everyone noticing so. Everyone who was, well, me. I did everything I could not to stay at home, sleeping over at my aunt's place, or even trying to contact my brother. But there was even certain nights I had to stay home, and it was hell on earth. Every single day, she was scolding me for nothing. It was such stupid, simple things. Forgetting to buy milk on the way home, forgetting to cook dinner. What could I do? I was 13. My mom couldn't even tell me how sorry she was. She kept on. And one night, she just lost it. I remember it clearly. It was something about the dishes. I had to clean after dinner like always, and this time I accidentally dropped the plate. It fell on the floor, hitting hard and shattering into tiny pieces. My mom was, of course, furious with me. I could understand her at some point, get why she was upset with me, but now I blamed her for everything that had happened. But this time, she just didn't scream in my face for a minute or two. This time, she was acting out violently, throwing a chair across the room. She screamed at me, not even for being a perfect son. How she lost everything because of me and my brother. Everything was our fault. A slap to the face, and then she was done. I ran and locked myself up in my room, and there he was, waiting for me. It was evening after all, and for the first time in almost 2 years, I spoke to him. He was the only soul I could talk to, even though he was imaginary. Even though I was basically talking to myself, I didn't care. I desperately needed it, and for the first time, he spoke to me. He was more calmer than I thought he'd be.
Your mom, she's evil. I disagreed. She wasn't evil. Or was she? She ruined my life. She hated me, but I still shook my head. Don't cry, he spoke to me. Big boys don't cry, so calm down. I'll go talk to your mom. You're going to sleep. You'll need it. I did as he said. No questions. I went to bed. My heart was pounding, and my head was spinning. My mom never checked up on me. She would probably leave anyway. That's the only thing she ever did. Give up on us. On everything. On life. It didn't take me long to fall asleep that night. In the morning, I would just return to school like nothing had ever happened and find the same pathetic alcoholic mother the next day. But there was never meant to be another day. I woke up again. It was completely dark around me. The apartment had been lost of all its power. I didn't wake up all by myself, though. There was some kind of noise outside of my bedroom. Weary and insecure, I stepped up from my bed and moved out into the hall. It was a creaking noise, like someone stepping on ice or a broken piece of glass. But it was far from dull than that. My curiosity took over and I continued until I found the source of the breaking sound and snapping. It was from my mother's bedroom. What was going on in there? My mom was supposed to be sleeping at this hour. I came closer. The noise appeared louder. After a minute of listening outside of my room, I decided to go in. I pushed the wooden door and stumbled to my knees. What I saw, no. What was supposed to be such a thing? My mother had been thrown towards the floor. Her face was bloody, and her nose seemed broken. She was kneeling down with her arms extended backwards in an unnatural position. Hands cramped out of pain. She looked like she was screaming, but only coughed out, wheezing hard. She saw me. That's when I lost it. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I only crawled towards the bedside, clutching onto what looked like the thing to save me at that point. My mother's arms were broken in front of my face, but something I couldn't hear or see. I could only see her, my mother, scared out of her life. And then he slowly appeared before me, his gray hands in my face, emerging from the shadows. His golden eyes were completely focused on her, and then I could see what he was doing. With one foot on her back, his fingertips whipped golden threads that tied themselves to her arms. He was breaking my mother's arms in two. My puppet man. Then her bones wouldn't hold it anymore. They eventually broke, snapping in a horrible trail of sounds. I tried to scream again, but everything was once again muted by my own fright. I tried to calm down,
tried to realize I was only imagining everything, but it was real. My own friend, imaginary friend, was killing my mom, and I did nothing to stop it. He wasn't pleased. I tried to call to him, tried to beg him to stop, but he just wouldn't listen. He only continued to hurt my mother further. He'd take his time and seemed to only break every bone in her body. He forced me to sit there, made me watch as he broke my mother apart. He told me he was going to get rid of evil. I wanted to believe him, but I just couldn't. He broke her legs, ribs, even fingers. Bones turning every direction, they couldn't. I screamed and screamed. No one heard me. His golden eyes turned to look at me as he hushed me for one final time. Then he slaughtered her. Beautiful golden glow strings of death wrapped around her throat. Squeezing out the last glimpse of life, I could see my mother's eyes, and it was the last thing I could remember before it went dark. I passed out on the floor by the bedside. Our neighbors had heard my screaming and had called the police. Everyone pitied the orphan who had seen his mother die in front of her eyes. But according to them, my mother hadn't been murdered. She had been found in the middle of the room with a noose around her neck. The rope hadn't been able to carry her body after a while and had brushed in two, causing my mother's corpse to fall down to the floor. I never spoke about her death ever again. Neither did I say another word about my imaginary friend. Maybe it had been a horrible dream after all. And he was always in my head. Even at my mother's funeral, I was completely alone. My brother didn't even show up. Only my aunt and my uncle were there. Everyone saw this coming somehow. Everyone but me. And I spent hours waiting for him to come and pick me up. The only one who had listened to me all this time, held me company, comfort me when I needed it the most. And when I was standing alone by her coffin, I suddenly felt someone grabbing my hand, and I smiled, his gray hand on my shoulder.